Jeremy hit perfect. Just a couple updates for you guys. We are in the last stretch of June, which is so crazy to think about that we are almost to July. But what that means is if you haven't finished your CE for the year, please make sure that you are taking care of that this week. If you have any questions around that, please make sure that you're reaching out to Jeremy or Francis about that. But definitely that is something that you are going to want to finish up in the next few days. And then just the other disclaimer is basically watching that NRG Facebook Connect group for any updates. There's a lot of agent questions in there too, so feel free to respond and help other fellow agents on that end as well. So that is my updates for today. Next week, we're actually going to have an open forum. So basically what that means is come with your questions, or if you need help with anything, we're going to just kind of open it up and see how we can all kind of bounce ideas off of each other to help navigate through this next half of the year, as I say it. So without further ado, I am going to hand the floor over to Randy. He's got a lot of information to go over today. So thank you guys again for taking the time to be with us. And we'll go from there. So there you go, Randy.
Hey guys. I wonder if maybe I'll just get into the first part. You know, all these form updates can get kind of boring. So I think I'll, okay, I got to share my screen. Anybody want to give me a hint? Do I go down to more?
Bottom, it should be on the green and it says like share screen right on the bottom.
Okay. So
there we go. We can see it.
I went through this and I blew it up. We can email a copy of this. A lot of times I think people just work their way through a transaction and find out what forms say. So it's kind of nice to have a little heads up. I think the main things that have changed are related to the commissions and the rules around paying the commissions. So this new clause in the purchase agreement solves all our problems, I think. The only issue is that, you know, you can't go into the MLS and see what the co-op is. And so when I send these out, if you guys, when you get these, if you look like you scroll down these, has anybody received these from the board yet? No?
No, just brokers are getting them at this point, Randy.
Yeah, so everything that's been changed is highlighted. So when you guys see these, you don't have to read through the whole thing. You can quick find the highlighted items. This is a nice form, that the addendum to the contracts, so that if you ever change the terms of a listing agreement or a buyer agreement, you can write it in here. I don't know that this existed last year. I think this was just created now in August of 24. So that's a nice form to have. I might skip down to the commission thing. Let me see a couple of the changes that are up top here. Excuse me. Let's see.
Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, scrolling all the way down to find something. Okay. You know, here's a contract for deed addendum, and they just highlighted some things. I don't know if you guys know that. Well, we got a lawsuit going right now, and one of the issues is that the seller is a, you know, a professional real estate investor. There's a state law that if somebody's kind of considered an investor seller, I guess here's the I don't know. There's a description here on investor sellers. So if you do a contract for a deed, you're supposed to let the buyer know if the investor, if the seller is an investor, if they're not an investor. And if they are an investor, there's a pamphlet to hand out. So the pamphlet is probably towards the end of this paperwork, but it's something about what you need to know. And it just lets the buyer understand that, you know, the seller can take back the property on a CD. Again, I guess the state's trying to protect, you know, the public, so they created a new form or a new law. One of the big things that's in all the contracts, we're going to keep seeing this, is that the broker may not receive compensation for brokerage services from any other source that exceeds the amount in this contract. So it kind of, if you're with a buyer or a seller, you're gonna tell them what you're gonna make, and then basically you're agreeing not to accept any other bonuses or cash or anything. So it keeps the playing field honest. They've added that now this year in every agreement. See, here it is again. I'm gonna show you my plan on this ruling for NAR, how to present it to sellers. Everybody can come up with their own idea, but you know, this compensation stuff is, I'm only scrolling because there's nothing here that's changed, right? So I'm gonna stop whenever there's something that's changed. So right here, they've added the Cemetery Act into the disclosure. You guys know this is the alternatives, right? And so there's specific things that a seller, even though they're filling out the alternative form, that they have to still disclose. So it says basically starting at 49, each of these items, A, B, C, you know, meth and stuff like that, that has to be disclosed. You can't just waive that in alternatives. Let's see. So they added the Cemetery Act and if anybody has questions about any of these items, type them in or something and we'll decide if we answer them or wait. Because we could actually breeze through this really quick if we want to. Oh yeah, this one about special assessments now in the disclosure. Basically, they're saying that, you know, if the seller has received an assessment from anything that, I guess I thought they're asking the buyer to assume anything that happens after the buyer purchases the property, but I guess that's not written right here. It might be somewhere else. So any assessing authorities, you know, might mean an HOA also, not just a city. So like when somebody's sitting around in a HOA meeting and they know there's going to be a new roof put on, but it's not in the governing documents, that's kind of when issues start to pop up. People buy these places and, you know, they don't read the condominium minutes. It's kind of important to go back sometimes and see, say, the last year of meetings when this board gets together and start talking about potential large improvements. You know, now they're kind of saying that if anybody knows about any project that's about to, that's being talked about, that it needs to be disclosed. There's just another area. Ooh. Yep, there we are. No, I'm pretty sure all we're gonna see on these buyer agreements is this commission stuff. And on seller agreements, adding that, you know, you're not gonna receive funds outside of what is agreed on in here. So when you get to a facilitator for a seller or, you know, the regular agreement for a seller, this is where it's gonna, we added all this language here about the total compensation, and then, you know, down here on 36 and 39, what are we going to pay out to the buyer's broker? So people are going to start to ask the question, well, what about all this stuff we heard on the news and stuff like that? So if somebody asks, like, right, don't say anything that's not necessary to say, but if a client asks you about it, then you can have the conversation about what you're going to co-op and why. And the reason is I would take a copy of the page of the purchase agreement with the new language and just show them that if we don't offer something here, they're just going to come and ask you for it anyways. It's going to be rolled into the transaction. So even if the seller says they're not going to offer a co-op, you know, the only thing that we can't see here is what the co-op is in the MLS. But there's that rule that the articles of the ethics, the code of ethics has, where you can't negotiate a co-op. And so that's true, but it doesn't matter because you don't have to negotiate the co-op. You're clearly going to ask in the purchase agreement for the seller to pay you as a buyer's rep. Yeah, okay, here's the cooperating broker language right on the next page. Either they're going to offer it or they're not. So we're just going to educate the sellers to offer it. Yep, again, this compensation thing that you won't if you're facilitating for tenants or representing tenants, you're going to agree on your paid price, your paid listing fee, your commission fee. Let's see what this form is. Yeah, right to lease. They got the same information in here. I don't know. They had to be read all this stuff, and the only thing that interested me was the NAR ruling, and I think it's last.
Yeah, so Randy, that first part that you showed there, where it said it would reduce the, I guess, seller's broker compensation.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm just kind of scanning through this really quickly, but it almost seems like you want to put 0, meaning you say, hey, I'll help sell your house, at 3%. If you choose at a later time to offer the buyer's broker compensation, it doesn't impact my compensation.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way
Following
to,
it, yeah.
that's a way to list the property. A lot of people are talking about doing that. It's just a way to get in the door. It's kind of been going on for a long time, actually. It's kind of like, hey, I'll list your house, and when you sit down at their kitchen table, you bring up the buyer's compensation. So it makes, people have been advertising that way because it's a way. They're like, how are you going to sell my house for 3%? Okay, we'll talk. And then when you get there, you kind of already met them. It's kind of like a Chris Lindahl or Craig Proctor training from 20 years ago. How to get in the door, and then you tell them what the plan is, and then you wind up shaking hands and becoming friends, and you just list it for full boat, But if they offer 0 on here, it's just fine. It doesn't really matter, because I don't know why they don't put it on until the end. Let me jump to the clause, and I'm going to come back to here. So what page is this? 72. I'm just going to get down to this. Okay. Oh, I already cut and pasted it. I should know exactly where it is. Here it is. So now page 9 of the broker's agreement basically says when you're filling this out for a buyer, you're just going to write seller's contribution to buyer's broker compensation. So there's a lot of controversy of whether you can put this into a purchase agreement. And I kind of was explaining, it didn't violate the law to put this into an agreement. Some people think it's not ethical, but the attorneys here and the board of realtors think it's just fine. And so it's just, you can't say, I want to change to cooperating payout. So if you see the last line here, actually, it says, so this is to cover the articles, the code of ethics, this last line. This amount is addition to brokers offer a cooperation compensation, if any. So if you just go into a purchase agreement, you don't even have to call around now to find out, hey, are you going to co-op with me or not? Because you just write this offer, and the seller is going to see 2.5%. They're going to have the conversation with the agent, and the agent's going to go, hey, I'm already offering 2%. And then you'll just reduce this thing to 0.5 point or whatever it is, whatever the agent's offering, maybe they're offering 3%, 2.5, but this will either just be a negotiating part of your purchase agreement. It's just one extra thing we have to do now. I don't know if that makes sense, or if anybody has any other ideas about it, but
So
I don't
Randy,
think we'll go too far
Randy,
on,
this is
scenarios. I mean, it simply is, it is what it is, and this is how they protected us.
Randy, this is Steve Whitaker.
Well, that's the last part of this. So I'll go back up to page 72 where I was. I mean, some of this stuff gets pretty dull.
Randy, I think Steve was trying to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
So,
I don't know if that matters.
yeah, well, kind of go back to that section. So if it's in the purchase agreement, anything handwritten in the purchase agreement, as I have understood over 35 years of doing this, is negotiable. Just because we put 2.5 in there representing the buyer doesn't necessarily mean the seller is going to pay it. He could still say go pound pavement. So you're still now negotiating your commission as a buyer's broker.
Yeah, they can try to do that. At the end of the day, we increase purchase prices sometimes to cover certain costs, especially closing costs for buyers. And so, I mean, yeah, that's negotiable also, right? So,
but has the mortgage industry come back and said, or has Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac come back and said they're going to cover increases in purchase agreements as they do.
Well, as long as it
taxation
appraises, it'll be
points?
covered. This is just part of the purchase agreement. It's not necessarily so much an increase. I mean, I think that after showing this page to any listing agent, it shows this page to any seller, they're gonna come down to the conclusion that they need to offer a co-op or people aren't gonna show their house. You know? So I'm pretty sure that the attorneys vetted this with the lenders.
I kind of look at it a little bit different, is that, you know, the listing agent or the lister or the seller has said, I'm only going to do it for 3%, as Andrew mentioned earlier, that I'm going to pay you, my agent, helping sell my home. If I see a purchase agreement come in, that buyer representation agreement is the most critical contract for a buyer's representative to determine how you're going to get paid. Yes, you can ask the seller to contribute towards your payment, but it's going to rely more on the retainer or getting money straight from the buyer. How that buyer gets that money is this clause in the purchase agreement.
Yes.
So there's still, this doesn't, to me, this does not cover necessarily the situation for a buyer broker. This just is another opportunity for the buyer broker to mitigate an expense to their buyer that might be coming out of their pocket. As
Well, you
opposed
got a
to,
buyer that doesn't have any money down, the commissions always come out of the transaction, right?
well, they've always, forever, the sellers have always paid the transaction as was the result of the mortgage. We know that. That's been happening since time. You know, that hasn't changed. You know, whatever that purchase price of $100,000 is, 7%, 6%, 1% came out of it to pay for the real estate fees. It came out of the mortgage. We all know that. That hasn't changed. But I'm looking at this clause and the clauses that you kind of skipped over earlier that says, hey, I can only pay out a brokerage fee equal to what's in this agreement. Some builders out there offer payment of 2% plus a bonus of 1,000. Well, how will we know that until your buyer decides to do that transaction when we've signed a buyer's agreement 3 months ago with your buyer to start showing them houses?
They created the amendment form. So you're going to tell your buyer it's your lucky day because they're buying this builder's giving you a bonus and sign the amendment.
So that's kind of the procedure or process that we might need to look at here a little bit more closely as to how we deal with that and when these agreements come into play as agents so that we don't miss something.
Yeah, for sure. So this is going to be kind of something that everybody learns how to sell around and work with.
Okay.
But these are the tools we're given, right?
And then are you going to be sending these out for us to look at?
Yeah. I don't know how to attach and I'm busy doing this. So I'll forward this to Jill right now and maybe she can upload it or we'll have Jeremy send it out.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure you guys that everybody gets a copy of these forms emailed out. I'll try and put them in the chat here, but the best way is going to be to email out to everybody.
Yeah, there's a commercial one too with updates, but since I figured that we would do on the side or anybody can look at individually and call me. Let me see here.
Well, these forms will be on the transaction desk, won't they?
Yeah, I think they might not be out there yet, but they will by August 1st.
Yeah, most of this stuff is not going to start till mid-August. So so we shouldn't see this until they do the forms update, which we'll get from, you know, we'll get a notice from the associations and everybody stating that they updated these.
Hey, Jill, this is Tim. When are these forms going to be enforced? You said mid-August?
They're saying right now mid-August. So and again, we've had timelines change, so we're not 100%, but it should be mid-August.
So what we've been using right now, we're still good until that point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
There's not going to be. Is there going to be any highlights on the ones on the forms in the transaction action desk, or this is just for our purview, right?
Yeah, no, the transaction desk won't be highlighted.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, so will when will it change on the MLS? Is that changing mid-August too? Then, like, we won't see the compensation anymore starting like when they give the notification?
These forms will be updated on August 1st.
All right, so same with the MLS then probably, right?
Yeah. The kind of the rule, as a realtor is that you agree to use the updated forms when they're distributed, but in the past, we haven't a lot of times really done that. Now there's a big enough change with this commission, we're gonna have to. A lot of times people just phase into them. But these should be available August 1st.
Sounds good, thank you.
Yeah. What did I do again? Just gonna keep downloading this.
Well, what do you think about, kind of letting your clients and buyers and sellers know that something is coming? I think that, letting them know things like that kind of gives you more credibility. And I think it would create more of a trust in that you're keeping informed of like market updates and changes. Because I have a couple of people that are going to be selling, and I sent them information on about the changes that are coming and why and what happened and kind of blah, blah, blah. But that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I would be kind of, there's something to be said about overselling too. So if it's not an issue, it's not an issue, but it's nice to make sure everybody understands everything. But, if they go into this now prior to August and they agree, with the co-op and all that stuff, the only thing that'll change is it will be wiped out of the MLS in the middle of August. So the information just won't be there publicly for an agent to see. And then we're all going to decide how we're going to move the data into our business websites. There's some people right now trying to collaborate so that they can turn our personal company's websites, and then we can put up the co-op information there. So if you really like, all this does is puts it in an additional place in writing. So I guess what I mean is sometimes you could complicate your conversation by bringing some stuff up too, right? But it's good to have all the information, but like, I don't know how much more information is needed.
Yeah, I would tend to agree in that, my general conversation with sellers is, when you talk about compensation, it's marketing 101, right? I mean, you need to incentivize buyers agents to want to show your home, and nothing is necessarily changing with that. I mean, they're your most powerful tool to help sell your home. So, yes, it's not going to be on the MLS, but it'll be interesting how everything shakes out, because it is a little different, but I don't think needs to be a huge deal.
Okay, but in March, it was a big deal and it was all over the news and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal, and it kind of is a big deal. And the couple of people that I'm thinking about are most likely going to be listing now a little bit later on and maybe early fall, hopefully not. But so I don't know. I think I don't know. It's just
no, it is a big deal. It's just how big of a mountain do you want to create out of it, right? I'd try to probably mull over it. It's just facts. It's just a matter of information.
I don't see it that way. I'm making a mountain. I'm just kind of letting.
I mean, there's several ways to skin a cat. We can all agree on that, At the end of the day, just get our people educated and list them.
Okay.
At the start, I mean, if I come and put an offer in on your house, I'm going to ask for 2.7% or 3%, right? Like, I think the sellers just need to anticipate that a buyer's agent is going to come in, and part of that purchase agreement, it's going to be, call it 2.5% to 3%.
Yeah, that's why when we get the listing, I would always pull out that page and explain to them, if they have a question about co-op, then I would explain they're going to come and ask for it anyways.
If you're saying that they're supposed to anticipate that, is that coming from like the estimated proceeds? that
It
they're
always
gonna-
has in the past.
Do you mean that they should know that that's gonna happen?
Yeah, they should expect that. And it's a negotiation piece, but everybody's gonna want to get paid for their time.
So I have a question for Andrew. In his scenario that he's gonna put 2.73 or 2 point whatever number goes into the purchase agreement on behalf of his buyer. What did your buyer representation agreement look like? Are you saying in your buyer's representation agreement that the only way that you're gonna work with this buyer is if you have a cooperating commission structure with the seller?
I am, and again, this is the first time I'm looking at these forms, just like everybody, but in my buyer agreements, I'm going to put probably 3%.
Paid by who?
Paid by either the seller and or the buyer.
So if the seller comes back to your point, it just rejects 2.7 or 3 or 2.5 or whatever number you put in there, and he rejects that, says absolutely not. Your buyer is now on the hook should they buy that house for 2.7, 2.53, 1, whatever the number is.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think it's another negotiation point, right? So it's nothing different than if we said, hey, we'll give you $300,000 for your house, and the seller comes back and just says no.
And the seller, quite honestly, I'm kind of looking at it from the seller's standpoint here, play a little role play saying, I'm not going to pay this because you already have a buyer's agreement that says your buyer is going to pay you that if I don't. So there's no, they have no, there's no reason for them.
That's the interesting one too, right? Because I think like the way that it's all about supply and demand, right? I've got houses that we put them on the market and they get 10 offers the first weekend. I've got a house in Woodbury right now. We're advertising 3.5% buyer's broker comp because we're not getting showings and we're having a hard time selling the home, right? So that's the way that I've talked to the seller about it is, let's offer buyer paid closing costs. Let's offer a higher buyer broker compensation to incentivize everyone to come in and actually take a look at the home. So I think to your point, and I see where your challenges are because they're valid. I think it's scenario specific.
Correct. And there's not a right, there's not a wrong. This is just going to be a constant evolution of conversation between buyers and brokers, sellers and brokers, and everybody at the table. Hopefully it goes back to face-to-face meetings, but I doubt that'll happen.
Right.
There was a couple things, and I can't get these forms dropped into this. It's too much, so we're gonna have to email it out. There was a couple questions in the chat that I just want to have Randy address here quick while we're going over this. First one, Randy, is a commercial agent in Wisconsin, and I have clients signing a rental agreement in August. I'd like the forms emailed out.